You've heard of the Renaissance, but do you actually know what it represents and why it's such a significant time period? I didn't. So I did some digging, and in continuation of my series exploring art history, today we go a little deeper into the history of the Renaissance and answer the question of how one of the most important segments of our history came to be. So to give you some context, the Renaissance begins in Florence, Italy around 1400. But prior to this, Europe had just survived the Black Death, which killed around a third of the population. What followed was a new order that marked the end of the feudal system, where land equaled power. Lords owned the land and peasants worked on it. Instead, we got mercantile capitalism, where money equaled power. No longer were economies land-based, but trade-based. And because so much of the population had died, there was a labor shortage, thus giving workers a ton of leverage. Serfs could negotiate higher wages, or just flee to cities like Florence or Venice. Aristocratic land became less profitable because of lower rents. Nobles were land-rich, but cash-poor. On the flip side, the working class now had extra money and demand for goods increased. Trade became increasingly profitable. But there was no infrastructure for this new kind of economy. Prior to this, lords owned large swaths of land, and peasants would work on the land in exchange for food and security. In the new economy, we needed currency and credit and risk management, which brings us to one of the most influential figures of this entire time period, the Medici family. Now, the Medicis are a topic that truly deserves its own video in the future, but put simply, they came to power at a time where the Pope needed to collect taxes from all across Europe, and that money needed to flow to Rome. But it was dangerous to be constantly moving physical gold and silver, which paved the way for the Medici family, who could transfer money via paper and had branches in multiple cities. They were not aristocrats, however, and in a time where rule was a question of bloodline, they came to power through finances. But this created a problem. How do you justify power when you don't have divine right or noble ancestry? You buy legitimacy through culture, which is exactly what they did. According to Medici account books, Cosimo de' Medici spent 663,000 florins on architecture and art over his lifetime, roughly $500 million in today's money. The Medici Palace, renovation of San Lorenzo Church, rebuilding of San Marco Monastery. When you walk through Florence and see the Medici coat of arms, what you're seeing is power and political influence. And possibly the most significant thing the Medicis did was their patronage and sponsorship of some of the most influential artists of all of history, including Brunelleschi, who rebuilt the San Lorenzo Church, Donatello, who sculpted David, Michelangelo, who went on to paint the Sistine Chapel, and Da Vinci, who went on to paint the Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. The more I look into the Renaissance, the more stories I get exposed to. And in future videos, I want to explore more into how the Medicis use art to consolidate power, as well as the relationship between the family and the artists. So if you want more, please like and follow, and let me know what you think in the comments.